world is. And what I want to do is have Dave Vellante come up, who's going to be chairing this panel with us, or moderating it. Gentleman Tim Lyons from Merck, and Cole Crawford from Facebook, and obviously those from OCP, to talk about how this industrial compute capacity gets transformed from industrial use to enterprise use, because this is what enterprise compute is going to look like in the near future.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, George. While we're getting set up, I just wanted to share a few stats with you from the Wikibon community and around the industry. The average depreciation cycle on a typical U.S. data center is 25 years. By 2018, the global market for cloud equipment is forecast to hit $80 billion. In fact, that so-called converged infrastructure business is a $400 billion market. So proprietary bullshit is actually very lucrative. The 5-year CAGR for cloud workloads is 44%, while the corresponding on-premise figure is in the low single digits. Today, Matt Eastwood of IDC tweeted out some figures. 7% of x86 revenues now come from ODMs and 12% of the volume. So, as my colleague John Furrier says, we are seeing an engineering reset around infrastructure. And it's starting at the heart of Silicon Valley, and it's enabling us to sort of release the shackles of decades and decades of hardware barriers. So we're going to talk about that today. Welcome to our panel, Open Architecture, the Tipping Point for Enterprise Cloud. You guys have met George Slessman. He represents our innovator today. Tim Lyons is the Executive Director of Digital Innovation and Outreach at Merck, so he represents the voice of the customer. He's got a strong background in financial services. Thank you for being here today. And of course, you all know Cole Crawford, who's the Executive Director of the Open Compute Foundation and the co-founder of OpenStack and the herder of cats, and is going to represent the standards today. So let me start off with just an introductory question to Cole. I wonder if you could talk about the state of the open source movement, specifically as it relates to architectures. I'm also the co-host of theCUBE. We love sports analogies. Where are we? Are we at the national anthem? Are we in the first inning, well into the game? Give us paint a picture as to where we are.
Sure, and thanks everybody for coming. I think in terms of architectures on the software side, we're well into the game, right? I mean, open source on the software side has proved itself. It proved itself way back in the 90s. And I think on the hardware side, now you're getting sort of that same critical eye applied to hardware that we used to ask about. Is this thing called Linux? Is it acceptable in my data center? And I think as we go through the process of figuring out what works for us, that pull process that Frank mentioned earlier, right? The proprietary BS word, right? That's the way that business was done. And in the new world, you're seeing a pull process where people are saying, hey, this is my pain. I want to manufacture my own aspirin. So I think that, I think on the software side, it's been proven. On the hardware side, this is a testament to the validity of open source on the hardware side.
So Tim, you came out of the financial services business. They tend to be a harbinger of major trends. From your perspective now in the large pharmaceutical, are we at a tipping point with enterprise infrastructure generally and cloud specifically?
I think it's a little bit earlier in the healthcare pharma industry, but I think it's really important for the future of pharma. If you think about all the opportunities around analytics, to do drug development, to improve manufacturing, to analyze real-world data, to hopefully someday have more personalized medicine. When I think about that, I think about how do you start to leverage scale-out technology that a lot of the companies like Facebook or others have done. So from my perspective, if you're going to start analyzing massive amounts of data, then leveraging the wave of open compute and OpenStack and some of the things that we've learned from our partners on the West Coast, I think is critical.
So you see that so-called hyperscale bleeding into the enterprise, but still some work has to be done, and we're going to come back and talk about that a little bit.
Yep.
So George, you've been pretty outspoken about the current model. You don't seem to like it very much.
I don't think my customers like it.
So what's wrong with it? Why is it broken? And
I think unfortunately or fortunately, it's a dollar issue, right? So what's happened is the compute necessity in the large enterprise space, and we're fortunate to do business with some of the largest consumers of IT in the world from on the enterprise side of the world, so the large financial services, pharma, healthcare, energy, right? These folks are looking up every day and have to deliver more compute capacity at a lower operating cost every single day. The complexity of their environments in these large organizations exceed anything that you'll see anywhere. And I think, and then contrapositively to it, when you really dig into, I think, the data, which we as an organization attempt to make all of our decisions around, the data tells you that this infrastructure is woefully underutilized, right? That these silos of capacity that are created, despite the compression driven through technologies like virtualization and other things like this, if you look at the entire stack, you're talking about full utilization rates of the total asset base in the teens, and that's when it's good, right? So this is an enormous amount of wasted capital, and then you backstop that with horrendous accounting decisions that have been made at given times for the enterprises, where the physical data center was put on a 27 or 30-year depreciation cycle. I'd love to see what a 27-year-old iPhone looks like. The point of it is that at the pace of innovation, it's impossible to keep up. And so the enterprise, the customer, is demanding a scale methodology for delivering applications to their users. Everyone forgets what the goal of IT is, and that's to keep a user in a persistent or non-persistent connection to an application. That's it. That should be our goal, and our goal is to deliver that in the most efficient and most economical way possible, tied out to what the service level needs are. That's it. And we should keep our eye on the prize. And what that means is everything below that connection is going to be commoditized. It's going to be delivered in a commercial and standardized way, and it's going to be delivered using scale infrastructure to support it. Cardboard boxes. I have this picture with a slash through it, which is a stack of cardboard boxes with a bunch of brands of our legacy friends on it, and with cables and everything hanging out of it, with a red X through it. Because the point of it is the era of the cardboard box stack, in our view, is coming to an end. The era of large-scale service and technology providers shipping the problems of IT to their customers is over. The customer wants to buy that connection, and that's what they're going to get. And the reason we're where we're at in our technology platform is because we listen to folks like Tim and others, and I know Don Duett from Goldman Sachs is here, who's been inspirational to our product set and what we're doing, and others. We're building this for our customers. This is not an experiment, right? It's not a lab project.
So Tim, is that sort of an accurate reflection of what it is you're looking for? And if so, if you're doing all this non-differentiated heavy lifting today, you're spending a fair amount of money doing that, both in your current industry and if you think about your experience in previous industries, what are you going to do with that extra resource? What challenges does that bring? Do you have to retrain those guys? And how do you get from where you are today to where you're going?
Well, I have one perspective, which is you kind of have an existing infrastructure that you're running well on some of the existing technology base, and that's important to most businesses, whether you're running your supply chain, your SAP implementations or whatnot. It's very critical. That infrastructure is very, very critical. So I'm more focused on thinking through how do we leverage these new models to go after new analytics models, as I discussed earlier. Again, I think a lot of the healthcare industry is going to have to leverage a lot more massive computing cycles to do so. And so I think in many ways we're positioned in a way to leverage this tipping point very effectively so that we're not going into the future in the old model that George really loves.
So you're saying this data-driven meme is actually becoming real in your organization. So I wanted to go to Cole and ask you, what gives you confidence that an open ecosystem can pull this off and deliver on George's vision and what Tim's looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Gartner recently, they did a study and they said, the best companies out there are people who look outside of their walls to innovate. No one company is going to control all of the greatest minds in an industry. So when you get these movements, these open movements where everybody's collaborating out in the open and we're working together, you find that pace of innovation happening much more quickly. You look at how Linux had grown and how OpenStack has grown and how we're growing, you see year over year massive percentage increases in terms of people supporting those causes. So again, I think the fact that we've got as many people as we've registered this year showing up to learn more about open compute and see that pace of innovation, You know, as Tim said, it's not about just data, it's about relevant data. And I saw a number published recently, 100 zettabytes a year are going to be collected in China alone with the Internet of Things over the next 10 years. So in terms of finding that data and getting to the relevant data that matters to your corporation, I think the only way you're going to be able to do that is through an open ecosystem.
So Tim, a lot of the executives we talk to in the Wikibon community, I get the feeling they just want to outsource the whole thing. How much, but from a practitioner standpoint, it's not necessarily feasible. How do you make that decision? How much do you want to own, and how do you make that decision as to how much you want to outsource?
It's use case driven. I mean, there's going to be certain data that you want to kind of run and own your own infrastructure that's pretty critical to a company. So for example, if we have a lot of R&D work that has pretty sensitive data about the molecules we're developing, that's something that we probably will not feel comfortable putting out. But if we're starting to analyze real world data, looking at, back to Cole's comment about all the medical device information that's kind of being collected, you know, that's something that a lot of it's probably anonymized, and it's something that we would, you know, that's a good use case for something like infrastructure service or I/O.
So George, maybe we could talk about the roadmap a little bit. Can you lay that out for us in terms of where we are today? What should observers look for? What milestones should we be looking at, and from a technical roadmap standpoint?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of we're getting to a tipping point, and we may be past it, where essentially this is not optional, it's a necessity, right? If you want to compete economically with your peer group, you're going to have to adopt some type of industrial style compute capacity to run your environment and drive your applications. I'm a huge believer that the data center should be an application level decision. I think that'll be the next big mile marker. If you think about the data center today, and when I say the data center, I'm really speaking of capital D, capital C, the data center, from space power cooling all the way up through to the platform services or even the applications. It needs to go from an enterprise level decision, which it is today, one data center fits all. And again, I'm speaking about our customer set, our influential group, which is the scale enterprise. They got to go from it being an enterprise scale decision. The next thing that we're going to see, I think, is going to be the real this will be the marker, the mile marker for this, is when they're making application level decisions about the data center, capital D, capital C, in a hybrid approach, right? It has to be a hybrid approach, right? Some things will be public cloud. Absolutely, workloads, Tim and I were talking about this before. There's certain workloads that make perfect sense to go into an Amazon or go into an Azure or go into any of these internet-facing public clouds. There's going to have to be something in the middle, right, that's going to be able to meet the compliance and security and complexity that these enterprises run under. I think that out here on the West Coast, we often get the luxury of running without a lot of regulators. I mean, we think we have regulation, but working with our Fiserv customers, it's monumentally complex. And you have to be able to comply and be clear and concise about what you're delivering. And then I think the other component of it is you have to be able to have things that support legacy infrastructure. Look, I saw that Saber's going public. Saber was the first mainframe, I believe, turned into production by IBM to run a reservation system, and that's still running on the same reservation system. So you have to be able to absolutely in your construct support this legacy approach as well. So you have to have this continuum. And I think to demonstrate, to the previous question, we're publishing our open architecture today. So this architecture that I just demonstrated us running on, we're publishing today. It'll be live and available off our website. Come by our booth and see it. Talk to actually Kevin Malik, who's sitting, our Chief Innovation Officer, sitting in the second row there, who had a career-defining moment about 10 minutes ago, is available to talk to people. So we're publishing that. And then let me just make one other comment. You know how many license fees I pay when we use this? None. Yep. Not one. Not one software license fee, not one hardware licensing fee. I'm not paying for the privilege to use something with a brand and plastic on it, right? And get crappy support. The point of it is that the barriers to this are coming down. And we're hopefully to be here to support.
Cole, we'll give you the final word.
Yeah, I just want to back up what was just said. If you look at what's in place now on the software side and on the hardware side, you're seeing that puzzle and all those pieces sort of converge together. You see silicon photonics contributed by Intel and being tested in a number of enterprises. You see open source hardware. You see the consumer first. And I think as you work backwards from the workload, Frank's comment about an inch, a mile wide and an inch deep versus a mile deep and an inch wide. As you take that workload and you work backwards, that's going to be the reality for the ecosystem in 10 years.
And I'd say just one last point, and we're over time, and I'm sure someone's yelling at us right now. But I think that the other point of it is I think the next mile marker that we should all keep our eye on is that ultimately the data center should be configured based on the application call. Yep. Right? That's the next mile marker. Yep. The next mile marker is, let's get from the enterprise-wide, like everything goes in this data center, to, oh, this data center slice goes to this application, to what we should be angling towards and what we're endeavoring to build in our platform is a capability to provision the infrastructure across the data center based on what the individual application call needs at a given time. Is it reliability? Is it security? Is it sustain? What does it need when it enters that infrastructure, and then you give it what it needs when it needs it. So that's out in the future, but it's coming, and it has to be on a foundation of an open ecosystem, in my view.
All right, George, Cole, Tim, thanks very much for your perspectives.
Thank you.
Audience.
Cool.
And stop by theCUBE this afternoon. We'll be unpacking these issues.
Thank you
very much.
Yeah.